Again, thanks everybody for being here. A couple housekeeping things real quick, if you don't mind. Mr. Portune is unable to be here tonight. His job that pays the mortgage got in the way. So he asked me to read a statement, if you don't mind. He says, "My apologies for not being able to be with you tonight due to both the requirements of my actual career as well as an unexpected health issue negating my original overly ambitious plan to drive 8 hours overnight after this meeting for a business meeting in Missouri at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. I am unfortunately now unable to participate in tonight's meeting. It is my hope that this meeting will be recorded in its entirety, so I will be able to catch up on the proceedings. It is also my hope that tonight's meeting sheds additional insight on the important issues being discussed and provides the answers and information needed to move forward. In that spirit, I am confident my fellow board members will ask questions I would also find to be pertinent. Thank you." Take care of that. So tonight, if the point wasn't made last week, this is a work session. Okay, so this is what the board meets. This is what the board does. We get together, people present to us, things are discussed, and we try and figure things out, right? The difference with this meeting and other work sessions is that we have 20-something other people participating, which is a good thing. Okay, this being a work session, just need to make a reminder that, and I was a little remiss last week, that this is the work session group here, the ad hoc committee. Everyone else in attendance is just a member of the audience, and if you don't mind, if you could just sit back and listen and take it all in, I would appreciate it. So, take care of that. So, thank you. So for tonight, and we're starting off with Grailville, is that correct?
Do you want to talk about the implications of purchasing or not purchasing the Grailville property? As we discussed before, part of the sort of social media narrative about Grailville, the Grailville contract impacting people's ability to support an operating levy, we wanted to have Christy come and have Grailville come and sort of talk about just the implications of the property. So if we were to cancel that contract, what work would the board need to do to lead us forward?
Okay.
So we do have both Christy here from Immersion, and we do have some guests here from the Grail.
Okay, we're going to start with the Grail?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we'd like to welcome Terry Puckett. Terry, thanks for being here.
Sure, come on up.
Yeah, come up here if you like to.
Excuse me, I'm out of breath. I was running to door 26, and that is nowhere near door 2030. So when I would hear was a square, it's not anymore. So it makes sense. Good evening, and thank you for coming and for inviting us to join you. My name is Terry Puckett. I am the Executive Director for the Grail in the US. I'm joined here tonight by Grail member Nancy Richardson, who is a member of the committee that works diligently on the implementation of the Grail's decision to sell the land parcels on the south side of Abandonville Road. In addition to being the executive director, I am also a longtime Loveland resident, homeowner within the city limits, and an alum of what was then Loveland Hearst High School, class of '88. We know there are questions, and we also know there is misinformation floating about, so please bear with me as I read a prepared statement which we believe will address many questions and rumors. And also take a deep breath. The Grail in the US works locally, nationally, and globally to further our vision and values. Called by our spiritual values, we envision a world of peace, justice, and renewal of the earth brought about by women working together as catalysts for change. The Grail is an international movement of women active in 21 countries on 6 continents. The Grail has had non-governmental organization observer status at the United Nations as part part of UFER, since 1953 and has held special consultative status to the UN Economic and Social Council in its own right since 1998. While each Grail country operates independently to address challenges unique to itself, as a whole, we focus on 4 general areas: spiritual search, environmental sustainability, social transformation, and the release of women's creative energy into the world. The Grail in the US, headquartered at Grailville since 1944, will celebrate its 80th anniversary in 2020, even as the Grail worldwide prepares to celebrate 100 years in 2021. The Grail in the US is a 501c3 charitable organization registered in good standing with the state of Ohio. Our articles of incorporation and required paperwork can be found at the Ohio Secretary of State's website. Our recent IRS 990 filings can be found on our website or at GuideStar. In 2014, members of the Grail in the US made the decision to close the Grailville Retreat and Program Center in Loveland. A committee of members was then empowered to explore options for the future of the space. They decided to do this via a request for proposals process. That process led to a plan to sell to a variety of entities and a well-woven tapestry of interdependent proposals. A vote on that plan was held in June 2016. Some of the items were approved, others were not, taking the Grail back to the drawing board. Prior to the vote, a new committee, on which Nancy serves, had been formed to implement the plan. After the vote, this group was charged with the task of finding a new solution. In 2017, Grail members were again asked to approve the sale of all the Southside land, not to any particular buyer, but to secure permission from Grail membership to sell so that we could negotiate in good faith with potential buyers. The vote in favor of selling was 78%, well over our bylaw requirement of a 2/3 supermajority. This vote gives the Grail the ability to sell that land without going back to our members for a new vote. At the time of the 2017 ballot, members were also asked to identify their preference for selling so as to give guidance to the implementation committee as they move forward. Members were asked to rank order their preferences from these options: agriculture, conservation, socially responsible uses, development, and no preference will accept best options identified by leadership. In the meantime, we negotiated 2 sales of property to the Claremont County Parks through grants from the Clean Ohio Fund, a state program which helps the buyers finance the purchase and locks the property into a strict conservation easement, but will only cover 75% of the purchase price. The Grail chose to sell at a loss of 25% and 35% of appraised value respectively, ensuring that the parks would be able to purchase the parcels. Thus, through this program, we have placed approximately 113 acres into permanent conservation, which will be open to use by the public forever. Financially, the Grail's total gift back to the community from the 2 sales was approximately $1.7 million. Because there have been questions about the most recent sale in comparison to the asking price for the proposed sale to the schools, I want to explain that sale in more detail. In our initial conversations with the parks, they had planned to purchase a little over 50 acres, but when the appraisal came in at $70,000 per acre, they knew that a grant to cover 75% of that would overwhelm the budget of the fund. So their proposal was only for 40 acres. Even so, with so many applicants, there were not enough funds available to fund all qualified applications. Therefore, the board of the Clean Ohio Fund asked all applicants to reduce their budgets. In response to this request, the Grail agreed to accept 65%, or $45,500 per acre, of the appraised price rather than the usual 75% for those 40 acres in conservation. Since we had already received 2 major grants for conservation from the Clean Ohio Fund, when the next dates for applications for that fund were posted, We were advised that it would be unlikely that we would receive another grant in 2019. Shortly thereafter, we were approached by the school district. Given our long history of supporting education, not only in the U.S., but also internationally, we are pleased with the possibility of working with the Loveland School District. Indeed, we see this option as totally compatible with Grailville's history as a center for learning, as well as our sale of property to the Children's Meeting House some years ago for the same reasons. After several months of conversation, we negotiated a purchase agreement giving the school district an option period of 1 year to complete the sale. This included an earnest money option deposit of $100,000. We included the option deposit because our cost to maintain this property, empty and unused, runs about $40,000 and between $40,000 and $60,000 a year, just to keep it insured, safe, and presentable from the road. Over the 5 years we have been engaged in trying to find the right buyer, we have spent almost $300,000 in maintenance costs. By signing a purchase agreement with the schools, we were required to maintain the property for a year and to refrain from speaking to any other potential buyers. The $100,000, therefore, is the average rate of our direct maintenance expenses and the loss we will incur and not be able to recoup with another sale because we have kept the property off the market to give the school district time to decide. Recognizing that the school district has special state requirements, we agreed that should they discover that they were unable to build on the site because of soil or substrate conditions within the first 3 months of the purchase agreement, they would not be liable for the full $100,000, but only for $5,000 for each month we had to hold off on sale and pay costs to maintain. The asking price of $70,000 per acre is the 2017 appraised value, originally done for the second park sale. Let me repeat. The offer to the schools was the appraised value from almost 3 years ago. We made this offer recognizing that a new appraisal would likely result in a significantly higher appraisal. Further, the purchase agreement has an option that should the school district work with the parks to put acreage into permanent conservation easement prior to the sale, then the purchase price for those acres would be determined according to the Clean Ohio Funds guidelines, meaning that the acres put into permanent conservation would be sold at 75% of the $70,000 per acre asking price. What does all this mean? 1, the Grail intends to sell those remaining 110 acres as soon as possible, so we no longer have to carry the cost of maintaining them. Remember the average of $50,000 a year. We have a legal responsibility to utilize our assets to further our mission, a fiduciary responsibility to do so wisely, and an ethical responsibility to care for our remaining elders who gave literally their entire lives in service to that mission. Our reasons for sale have not changed. We have spent 5 years to find the best possible options. A sale will happen. We will not hold the land until it's needed sometime in the future. 2, we are permitted by law and by vote to sell to any entity, including development. Do we want to sell for development? No. But we have responsibilities as noted above, and we have already spent 5 years and thousands of dollars in maintenance costs that could be better used for advancing our mission locally, nationally, and internationally. 3, we have been asked if we are willing to waive the above-mentioned $100,000 option deposit. We are not, for all the reasons above. Plus, in addition to the financial gifts already given, please remember we are a nonprofit, which means converting our property asset into a cash asset wisely will continue to fund our mission-related activities, including keeping our trails and labyrinth free and open to the Loveland community. 4, we have been asked if we are willing to sell the property in smaller parcels. No, we are not. We have no interest in extending our financial obligation in order to weave together multiple sales. Thank you again for listening. At this time, do I take questions, or I'm just done?
Does the board have any, clarifications or anything from the Grail regarding, earlier when we had talked about purchasing the Grail, the property that was, to allow for that expansion, none of our enrollment projections include having that property be developed. Were there any clarifications that anybody had on the board? Or
I don't know if it's a question for the Grail or a question for valuation. Do we have any idea what amount of that land is developable? So do we have any idea what might be the number of homes that would go in there if it was sold to a developer?
A basic answer, and again, should it be reevaluated, it might come up with slightly different numbers. There's about a 25-acre section in the center that is a ravine that I don't think is developable. I'm sure you could be creative with it, but it wouldn't be easy to do, leaving the remainder of that, so roughly 90 acres, 85 acres, developable. And my last understanding is it's a 1/4 acre per single family home, so 85 times 4 for a home, not apartments.
Has there been other sales of the property in the last 5 years?
Certainly. Again, the 2 parcels we sold to the Park District. The first one was for 73 acres. At the appraised value for that was $40,000 an acre. Of course, it was through the Clean Ohio Fund, so it was at the 75%. The second was the Park District at 40 acres at the 65% of $70,000. We have done a small sale to St. Columban St. Columban Parish to sort of clean up their lines. There have been a couple other smaller sales to neighbors. Oh, there was like 5 acres. It wasn't a lot, but it was at the, Nancy?
I didn't hear the question.
How much was the St. Columban school sale? St. Columban property sale?
I don't remember. You mean how much per acre?
Yes.
I don't remember, actually.
I understood it's less than $28,000 an acre. Is that about ballpark right?
I'm sorry?
Less than $28,000 an acre?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was a small amount where they keep their Stations of the Cross.
They have been using some of their land for a while to put up that Stations of the Cross, and so they did not want to let that go, and we've had a relationship with them for years, and so I could find the number, but it's certainly less than $28,000 an acre.
Were there other sales?
In the past 5 years?
Yes.
No. Like I said, there was a small one to a neighbor, and it was less than an acre. And that was, that was at the original appraised $40,000 an acre.
When was the sale of Children's Meeting House?
Oh, golly, that was, when did they build that school? Yeah, it's been a while. They started off on our lower level, the oratory, and when they wanted to expand their school, we sold them the land next door to do that, and that was well over 20 years ago.
an executive session on the end of the board to discuss the terms of the contract in any way. We can do that in executive session.
So just to clarify, so obviously we're talking 25 acres is not developable.
Anything is developable. I mean, I would say, right, easily, no. It's right in the center. It's a ravine for Bears Creek. So I would say, and it goes like a curve. So it's about 25, but it's not clumped. It's like this.
So of our 110, or 70K for each one of those, irregardless of developable or not developable. Okay, just want to clarify.
Mary, can I speak to that?
Please.
That ravine, because it has a little creek running through it, at least part of it, maybe all of it, I'm not sure, but it's a particularly friendly, I guess is the word a suitable thing for conservation. And I know that when we have talked with the parks, that was sort of their next interest, was trying to secure that waterway, because that's part of what Clean Ohio does, is secure waterways to keep the water clean. But I don't know the exact amount. I didn't think it was as much as 25, but we could find that out easily.
You were talking about the grant?
The Clean Ohio Fund grants, yes. So basically, because we wiped out the fund with our two, we were advised that we would not be getting any more anytime soon. But again,
They didn't say that.
they never said never, but
They said that the likelihood of it happening in the next year after we had just gotten two, and in both cases, they were sizable grants. And so this is for a lot of different areas, it's not just for this area. And so they said that other parts of the state were sort of wanting some money. And so that we were not likely to get another big hump. Personally, I would say go back to them if we have to. I mean, if the schools don't buy it, I would say that would be my first thing. Say go back to them and see if they've got the money now. But, and the schools could do the same.
Well, that's what was going to be my question to the board, like, you knew that 25 probably wasn't an area, and we didn't need all of that for developable. Was that something that we did look into, or
We've been working
see if we
with
could get that less than 7?
We did talk with the Park District about, they've got the area, the 40 acres that they discussed. They can't improve upon that in any way. So in order to allow people to access that through hiking or they can't improve, there's no parking. So we were in early conversations with them about can we do a swap where they would care for that conservation piece and we would let them park on our land so that people could have access to that. So that was early conversations with them, with the Claremont County Parks.
Terry, make sure I heard you clearly. So if the board makes a decision either to cancel that option or let it expire on March 1st, your intention is to move on with any option?
correct,
So development is on the table
is.
immediately.
it is. Again, because of the purchase agreement, we have not spoken with any potential buyers. That was part of the agreement. But when we did the vote in 2017, development was one of the 5 rank order preferences. And Nancy?
I just want people to also know that at the time that we were approached by the schools, we were in the midst of conversations both with the parks and with the nonprofit. And we ended those conversations when we began talking seriously with the schools. And so we know there are people out there who are interested in it, but we don't have anything on the table right now.
So this would probably more be for Kevin and Amy, but if we don't go through with that purchase and a developer does swoop in based on the buildable acreage, tell me if I'm doing this right, that would be like, what, 340 homes that they could potentially put there, right? What would that do to enrollment? I mean, obviously it would go up, but
John, what do we figure for
Averaging 1.5 children per house.
enrollment projections are 1.5 kids per house?
That's actually not true. It's 1 in every 4 homes has children in the district. Now, each of those homes may have more than one child in it, but you can't count 1.5
The
children.
question was, what do the enrollment projections use? And that's the metric that the enrollment projection uses.
I don't know.
What district is that property in?
Loveland.
It is Loveland. Does that answer that question?
What's the Grail's top priority? And so do you want to move quickly? Do you want to maximize value of the land? What do you look at? What does success look like to you guys?
I go back to, for 5 years, we've tried to find a solution that allowed us to get the best cash asset turnover from our property asset and keeping the space undeveloped. That has been our priority, and we've done that for 5 years. It's been a lot of work. However, that's 5 years, $300,000, and we're not going to continue that. I will say, and I'm not trying to be glib here in any way, but we have had calls in the past from developers. Should it go out that the land is back up on the market, I have no doubt that we will get our asking price for more sooner rather than later.
And your asking price is what?
The asking price for the schools was the $70,000 based on the appraisal 3 years ago. Should we go with developer? We don't have to keep that.
I know, so that's what I'm curious.
You know, that
I mean, it
was.
could be an easy decision, right? If your motivation is to maximize value,
Correct.
Your guidance would be let it
go.
expire. You make more money.
Well, except it's not. And remember, we do have a mission, we have a responsibility and relationship with this community. We've been here for 80 years. And that is why we've tried very hard to not go with the top dollar. Had we wanted top dollar, we would have sold it 5 years ago, the first time a developer knocked on the door.
Yeah, that's what I'm just trying to understand, has your motivation changed in 5 years?
No, ultimately our motivation is to maintain a space that we're proud of our legacy. But we're not going to continue to hold the space indefinitely.
I got you.
Just a little background, and this is something I was just informed of, and I haven't checked my records yet, but how many of you guys know the East Loveland Preserve down by the Moose Lodge, right?
Yeah.
Okay, did you guys know that was Grail land? Yeah, that was Grail land. And we farmed it until the 70s, but according to Mary Lou, she said it was a pain to get the equipment down there. So they put it up for sale, and it was on the market for 10 years. And they finally decided to sell it, my understanding was to a developer. So our decision at the time, after 10 years of holding that space, was we are offloading it. Now, it has not been developed because citizens stepped in and they purchased it, and it is now the East Loveland Preserve. But that is something we have done in the past, where we have given it our best shot until we have to look at what are our consequences to the organization, to our mission, to our members.
Just a correction, Terry,
Yeah.
I'm not sure of the total history of the East
That's-
Loveland Nature Preserve, but I bought the house from Larry Nesbitt.
Excellent.
Estate, or Larry Nesbitt, he was, anyhow, I bought the house, and the entire 22 acres were for sale from Larry Nesbitt in 1990, because I bought 5 acres of that 22. The 17, the city bought
Yep.
from Larry Nesbitt. So at least in 1990, Larry Nesbitt owned it.
Yep.
And before that, I don't know. But
It was us.
the intent when the city bought it was never to develop it. The city bought it to make it into lit tennis courts and ball fields. And that's the first time I actually met Dave Miller, because we did want lit tennis courts in our backyard, because that's not what the city told us at the time. But long story short, it hasn't been part of the development plan for decades and decades and decades.
Again, the point I was making is that when we held the land, we held it for a very long time trying to find the right buyer, and then we sold it.
Right, it's in a floodplain, so it never be built.
Yeah, does anyone else have any other questions?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are there any restrictions if the school does buy it? Once we buy it, are we restricted what we could do with it?
No.
If money, if money is made on the property, does that money go to a certain fund? Where, like, could it go operate?
30 acres, can
Yeah.
sell the rest and pay down debt or something.
Right. So it could be an investment and there's no legalities to, money has to go back to the state or anything?
Correct, no, it wouldn't go back to the state. Yeah, you could use it for capital reasons, and one of those reasons would be paying off debt, potentially, yes.
I have 2 questions, actually. The first question is, you mentioned that some acres could be put into a permanent conservation. Thank you. And sold at 75% of that 70,000. So who makes that decision about whether or not the land can be put into that permanent thing?
The way the purchase agreement was worded is that if the schools worked with the park district to
Okay.
navigate that and come to an agreement prior to the sale, then the final sale price would be based on that.
So that, at that point, no longer is the Grail involved in that conversation, and that is then a separate conversation that happens between the school district who owns the land. Yes?
And on that question, it's important to say that while we had to work with writing a proposal and agreeing with parks, et cetera, to to get money from Clean Ohio Fund, what we have said to your committee is that we would sell the property. If they put the easement on it, we will sell it to them at that discount, and they don't have to worry about what the Clean Ohio Fund is going to do.
Okay,
Right, so that would be between the school and the park district.
okay. Would say, you know, of the 110, let's say 50, would the park district be interested in 50 of those acres? And then you're saying the Grail would sell that to the school at that 75% reduced cost?
First, you would have to ask the park what they were interested
Okay.
in. I can't speak to what they are interested in. But for example, if the parks and the schools chitty-chatted and they came up with, we're gonna put 25 acres into a permanent conservation easement that the park district is going to manage, but the school will retain ownership of,
Yeah,
and they work that out, they get that agreement worked out prior to the sale,
yeah.
then when we do the final price, it would be 70,000 an acre for everything that's not in that, and then the 75% of 70,000 per acre for what is in that.
Okay, so I think that's an important thing for us to consider as the people on the committee move forward and think about what we're doing. Can I, from the board, get a little bit of clarification about like who's actually having input in this conversation? Because I feel like there's a lot of like note passing and other conversations happening.
Well, I mean, the way it's supposed to be working is the people sitting around this table are the ones who are supposed to
Okay.
be in the conversation, I mean, actually speaking, but I hadn't noticed any of that, so.
Well,
Okay.
But,
Right.
I'll address that, or,
Okay.
you know, we haven't spent the amount of time you all have spent working on all this, so it's a bit unfair to say to me that, well, somebody can't pass me that. And I haven't asked the question because I don't understand what I would be asking about, and hopefully I'm not going to set myself up for a dumb question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't
And
have
so
a problem.
it's not fair to say that. We're here to try to help, so don't say, hey, we're passing notes. Nobody's saying anything nasty about anybody. It's a very
Well,
simple
they didn't
question.
say anything, I said it.
Yeah, well,
And I think it's
Like
a
I
fair
said, I
question.
haven't seen any of it, so we're good.
yeah, okay.
I mean,
I'm just saying,
the whole point of being here, you know, again, we've been through this before over the last 2-4 years, is to seek out information, okay?
Right.
I'll say it again. What I am for is what this community says that they're for, okay? It's not my levy, it's not the school board levy, it's what the community. So whatever it takes for all of you to get the information that you need to make what you believe is the best decision for this community is what I'm for.
And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get
And I'm fine.
relevant questions.
If it's not being distracting or anything, you're good, from my standpoint. And again, like I said, I haven't seen any of it, so we're
So,
good.
you know,
But
we sat last week and talked about what were the driver issues, why you lost the levy. This is exactly it, because we don't want to throw numbers out that we don't understand or I'm not sure about. Nobody wants to do that.
yeah, and, you
So
know,
don't criticize us because some people are trying to help me through this.
I asked a
I'm not-
question.
I'm not,
I just asked
you
a
know, I'm not
question.
an expert on Grail, I'm trying to learn.
I got a question.
I got a
let's move
ton
on.
of questions.
Go ahead.
If we buy the land, do we have kind of any influence or say of maybe who else would invest in it? Background is, I moved from like North Avondale. People bought a house down the street. They're like, we're gonna put in a halfway house or a 3/4 house or a facility for sex offenders because they have all this money and they wanted to buy this land, and it's like, no, like I just invested, I don't want any that around like children or anything else. Just because I know that you're ready to sell the rest of the land, would you just sell it? Or like, can we be like, as Loveland, be like, no, or take a mulligan, like just kind of, you know, I'm sure you have an integrity and you wouldn't do that, but just to cover any kind of foresight of price tags.
See, I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that's why it's so important that we look at purchasing the land, then we're in control.
Right.
We have that.
And then sell it.
We could sell it to make money. We can sell part of it to make money. We control who buys it. We control how many houses go in there. I'm not an expert on how much per acre, so I don't know if it's a good deal or not, but I think we need to look at those things. I think this might be our last opportunity to buy a big piece of land for the future.
But you're talking about a school district who's going to finance this land over 30 years at $530,000 a year. They took that money out of a permanent improvement levy that was voted on by the taxpayers to improve buildings. Clearly, the money from that 2004 permanent improvement levy is not enough to maintain the buildings we have. So now we're going to reduce that money by 15%. You don't think that $530,000 a year can be better spent to educate children than to try and just rearrange the district? I mean, a school district is not in charge of figuring out who should buy land.
But here's the problem is we pretty much are in universal agreement, I think, that the buildings need.
And I actually agree with you on that.
So we're limited in scope in terms of where those things go.
Why can't we use the land we have?
It's also a space issue. It's not even, it's also, I mean, we're out of space. We need space somewhere. Even if we use the space we have, great, where do the kids go during that time? Like, let's
Same place
look
they go in any
through.
other
So
district. They go into-
let's do this if
They
we can.
have-
So I mean, you brought up a good point. Why can't we use the land that we already have? And that's why Christy Boron is here from Immersion. So she's going to have a lot of the answers to, I think, some of those questions. So if it's okay, how about if we move on to that part of it?
Our discussion. I mean,
Why
can't we have discussion? Why do we need the sales pitch first?
So I do think, so just for kind of to John's point earlier, I think that, Juliet, your comment about the sales pitch, I think it's good to have everybody on a level playing field in terms of the knowledge we have. I've read everything, and I've tried to read everything from Grailville, and I got new information tonight on Grailville, so I do think it would be helpful to have the overview of the land options, just and what our current land is, just so we're all on the same playing field. Everybody's done
I
different
just think when we're in the middle of discussion, it's not appropriate to say, okay, stop, so we can have the sale. I mean, why couldn't we just finish the discussion we're having and then have the sales
Well, I
pitch?
think
I just
that-
think
I
the
think-
reason we're here is constantly, negated.
It's not a sales pitch, it's to show the different options, and you're asking, why can't we just use the land we have? So that's certainly something we can discuss. Here's what it looks like if we use that land, here's what it's going to look like if we need more land.
We hired an architect. The architect did their study. Obviously, that's based on some requirements by the state of Ohio on what we build any new buildings on. I'd at least like to hear their pitch. We paid them $250,000. I want to know why we do need to purchase land, because I think that is something, that's why we're here today. So I've heard it before, but I'm interested, and I'm bringing a different set of eyes to it as well tonight. So, I mean, at least we have the people here that can answer the questions. And like to point, these people should be able to answer those questions tonight.
So to clarify, when we went through the work of the master planning with the community groups, we presented, the architect presented whatever the page A through E of those options, and we asked for input of which options did the group wish us to do more work on. So those were the new high school option and the option that was ultimately adopted. The options to utilize the property by the basic presentation, Craig had said, you've heard that. The basic presentation was enough for that group to say they weren't interested in it. The presentation that the board has asked for clarification on tonight from Christy is if we didn't have to do some extra work on what would happen if we didn't have work. So this is new information for everyone.
Can I answer Carrie's question? And I think Nancy, are you good? Okay, cool. So I'll answer your question. You asked if we sell it, would the community have input on the sale? And again, the short answer is no. It's a private sale.
No, I totally respect that. I just wanted to.
All right, so we have Christy Boron here. She's going to hopefully carry this on and be able to ask some of the questions where I think we might be heading. So, Christy, thanks for being here. Brett, you with you?
I don't think so.
All right, thanks for being here. Terry and Nancy,
I think my
thank you.
voice can project enough for everybody to hear me. Amy, were there slides that you needed to go through for mine? Okay. All right, so I was asked, and I'm not here to get a pitch, all right? So I do want to kind of get that out of everybody's mind. I am not here to sell or pitch anything. I have been asked by the board to show what does it look like if we cannot purchase any new property. That's all I'm here to do tonight, is to say, okay, if Grailville is not purchased, and what we have to work with is the existing primary elementary site, including the transportation facility, what can we do there? And let's take a look at what we can do at the early childhood center site. Okay, so that's what I'm here to show you. These two options assume, now when we went through master planning for the year with the community, the plan that resonated the most with the community was actually pulling 5th grade out of this building to solve some of the issues in this building. The two options, the options that I'm going to show you tonight, building new on the primary elementary site and early childhood center, assume that does not happen. Those sites are not large enough to grab 5th grade out of this building and add them to the mix on those other sites. So I do want to just make sure that that was made clear. So the first site we took a look at was the primary elementary school site. So here's an aerial view of it. You can see the transportation center that's kind of in the back part of the site. When we look at placing a new building on this site, the optimum location for that, and I'll bring up another site plan here in a second, is right where you see that orange footprint. Now the footprints that I'm showing you are, we know the number of kids that we would need to serve on this site. So what I am showing are footprints of elementary schools that match the square footage that we would need. Nothing's been designed. This is an elementary school footprint that is actually an existing elementary that has the same population size. And I'm looking for compact building footprints, because the reality is these sites are not really large sites. So I was looking for compact building footprints, which means we need to go more vertical. We can't afford to do a one-story. That's where this sits. You see that it would mean building a new building in the spot of where part of the existing building already sits. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So here's a quick diagram. Again, this is diagrammatic. Okay, this was how can I fit all of the parts and pieces that you need for a school. Does this mean that the exact bus drop-off location would be here? No. But in taking all the parts and pieces and understanding traffic flow, understanding safety for the kids, understanding accessibility, this was the first most logical layout for this site. There's a lot of acreage on this site that quite frankly is unbuildable, which is the dark green that you see on the back part of the site. That is a steep hill that has, I want to say, it would require, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, about a 50-foot high retaining wall in order to excavate that out and actually make it a buildable site. So it's really not cost effective to attempt to work into that back hillside, so we wouldn't recommend doing it. So what you see here, orange is new building. Ideally, we want that playground area to be behind the building. Again, we're looking at safety and security for the kids. That playground we don't want to have right there on the main busy road. So those are some of the things that we looked at when we were laying this out. We look a lot at traffic flow pattern. Parent pickup and drop off is a nightmare on this site. Parking is a nightmare on this site. Separating buses from playground and buses from parent drop-off is a nightmare on this site. So making sure that we separate those different things are really important when we're laying out a new building. So to put this is just a shadow so you can quickly see where the existing building sits. So you can see that basically we would need to, in order to build this new building, we wouldn't have to demo the entire primary elementary site right away, but we would have to demo the elementary building side of the site in order to build a new building. So that is 2 grade levels worth of kids that we would need to think about that would need a home while we build this. We also take into account constructability, the construction access, what it means to have an active site where you have kids learning in an existing building directly next to a new building. We do it all the time. It just has to be very thoughtful when you do it. There's a lot of safety and security measures that have to go into play. There's some additional cost because of phasing and those security measures. to make sure that the kids are separated. Lay down space for construction. Obviously, you need more than just the footprint of the building to build the building. There's a lot of space for construction traffic, lay down space, construction trailers, those sorts of things.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a quick question? Is that
Yep.
okay, or should I wait for the end? I just am wondering where in here, if we did this, is there space then to put modulars so that we could?
That, and I'll get there.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So what the quick answer for you is no. We need that entire site. We would need to keep the primary building up so that we have a place for kids, for the 2 grade levels that are there. The rest of the site is really going to be needed to literally build a new building.
Chrissy, rule of thumb, how long, I know you can't say with construction delays and things, but rule of thumb, how long to do how long would kids be in modulars?
2 school years.
Okay.
Okay, it takes 18 to 24 months to build a new school building. You have to take into account, one, we have to abate the existing building and demo it. So that's going to take the first few months out of the schedule, and then it typically takes about 18 years. Or 18 years, 18 months.
Well, in 18 years, they'll all be graduated, so it doesn't
Yeah, it'll take 18 months. So the safe assumption is you would need those kids out for 2 years. Okay? So let's talk about the implications to building a new building on this site. So what you see in the footprint is a 2-story, 126,000 square foot building to accommodate 3 grade levels. Okay? So right now we are assuming 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Okay? I know right now there are 4 grade levels on that building. But when you build right-sized buildings with the appropriate parking, 4 grade levels really don't fit on this site. That's why you guys have the headaches that you currently have on that site with 4 grade levels. The state suggested size for the number of students we're proposing is 20.4 acres. We have 16 available acres, so we're a little tight. And that 16 available acres includes taking the transportation facility. Okay, so you can see the last bullet point on here. To make this happen, transportation facility has to move. As I said before, the elementary school would need to get demoed to build the new building. The parking that is shown here addresses the regular day-to-day school parking that is suggested using state standards. I don't know if you guys exceed that or not. It doesn't necessarily account for event parking. There is a bus drop-off loop that you see in this site plan that, yes, we can layer some event parking in there. Would it satisfy your typical events that happen? No, you would probably still be parking across the street like you do now for your events. The playground area that's shown in here is about the exact playground area that currently, square footage-wise, that currently exists on that site. It is less than what the state suggests, because the state would suggest that you have hard surface play, equipment play, and grass field play. You don't necessarily have all of that right now on this site. You still wouldn't necessarily have all of that on this site once it got redeveloped. Once it is developed, there really is no more room for expansion. So if we did see a jump in enrollment and we needed to add on to this building, it's going to be pretty hard to squeeze any more square footage onto this footprint.
So you're looking to demolish all of the buildings at the end of the day?
Yes, yes.
So was there any consideration to keeping the piece that doesn't interfere with this new building?
Well,
the hockey stick?
When we did, and we can go back, when we did our building assessments of all of your buildings, and the state came to the same conclusion we did, the cost to keep these older elementary buildings and renovate them over time, it's going to be more expensive than to build new. So I would not.
You don't have the room to build new, right? I mean, you're always juggling priorities, right?
If you keep the existing building, if you keep half of the existing building, I still need to build a new building on that site. So I don't have enough room to keep the existing, build a new, and have all of the parking and the playground and the site that you need. You would lose all of your bus parking, your service drop-off. The existing building is extremely inefficient because of how sprawling it is. So you would be better served to take that square footage that's existing and build it, and what we're doing now, building it new on the site.
I just have a question in terms of, and I forget the history of this building, but obviously it was a high school at one point. So obviously when they dealt with those bigger students in that building, what would have been like over time this suggested site for X number of students? Like has that increased over time? Like now all of a sudden kids need more space?
The school sizes have increased over time. The average classroom sizes in your building are not what we would recommend for classroom sizes today for how we teach. The enrollment, I don't know what the enrollment was when it was a high school.
Meaning like how many students per classroom?
I don't know how many students they had per classrooms. I don't know how many students they had total in the building.
And it just matters what it is now, right? I mean, what it was in the 30s, I don't think is really relevant.
I think for
I mean,
You're kind of driving me crazy.
Oh, really? Am I?
Yes, I mean, it's just, obviously this building has stand the test of time for different grades and we've fluxed.
Some of it is the current special ed needs are different than what they were back in that day when we did not have mechanized wheelchairs and other equipment.
So we need rooms.
We need space in our rooms. When we're teaching kids in our classrooms, we need the space.
There's a lot of things. We did when we did the master planning, we did physical building assessments to see how much it was going to cost the district over time to maintain and repair what you have right now. And the rule of thumb is if the cost to maintain and repair a building exceeds 2/3 the cost to build new, you should be building new. Because the reality is a new building is going to have considerably more, it's going to be a more efficient building from an operation standpoint and from a maintenance standpoint. So it isn't going to take you long before literally you end up spending more to keep the buildings you have than it is to demo and build new. The other piece of this to keep in mind is that we are partnered with the state. And so when we are done building these buildings, we will get a reimbursement back for what we are doing. The state has gone in and done the same assessments we have and have told the district, you need to take down the early elementary and the primary school, elementary school. At this point, they will not co-fund any work we do in those existing buildings because of the cost associated with them versus building new. So that's just the physical building assessment. The other assessments we do are the educational assessments, which is how well can our teachers teach in the actual environment that exists. And that's when we look at literally how teachers are engaging students today and what we expect and how we teach our students today versus when these buildings were built. And the reality is buildings built today look very, very different than these buildings. Kids don't learn nearly as well in the older buildings than what they are afforded in the newer buildings. What teachers can do with those kids. I don't know if there's any teachers in this room that can speak to that, but yeah.
Okay, so this orange, I know this is not what you're projecting for Loveland. You said it's a different school building that had about the same number of kids
Right.
superimposed on our land.
Yeah.
So if that orange school building has enough room for 3 grades, and we need a 4th grade in there, why don't you just make it a rectangle? There's a whole lot of space there to just make a cool looking building, which we don't need. We need educational space. So if that orange building holds 3 grades, you could easily design, as an architect, a building that fits that same space that's maybe not as cool looking that fits another grade, no?
Egress windows?
Well, a lot of that has, yeah.
I mean, just fill in that front and make a bunch of extra classrooms. You got 2 stories
Or
there.
use all the side spaces for windows to escape and like
You
a
still have
fire.
windows would be all around the building.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't get into, I think it's a fair point, but I wouldn't get into the design. That's.
I'm not getting into the design, I'm asking, can we put 4 grades there if we have a differently designed building? It's a simple question.
You can potentially get 4 grades here, but you will not have any of them, you will not have the site to support it. Because as soon as you add another grade level to this building, you need more buses, you need more parking, you need more playgrounds.
So then the land doesn't
So,
fit.
yes.
The other hard part to 4 grades is when you're,
Options to increase the parking. That's all ground parking. I mean, I'm just throwing stuff out. What about a parking lot? Is that like super expensive?
It's extremely expensive.
the other part to 4 grades with the population that we have is when you're feeding kids lunch. I mean, it's something small, but it affects reality. Is your kids are eating lunch at 10 a.m. and your last lunch is at 2 p.m. because you have so many kids you're trying to fit in the cafeteria, it becomes a scheduling problem. So that could be part of why we're looking at 3 grades rather than 4.
Yes, and I'll go, the next site we look at, the early childhood site, I show also a 3 grade level building on that site. So I haven't kicked anybody to the curb.
You're just moving one of them.
I am. So that might, because the reality is that when you weigh the 2 sites, what's better, 4 grade levels at this site and 2 at early, or 3 here and 3 there? And that's some of what we had to look at.
And currently, we do not have the whole first grade at that site anyway. We have the first grade split because we currently don't have enough room for 1 grade in either space, so we have it split.
You're correct. We would be adding population to this site if we made it truly a 4 grade level building.
1,040, how many students are currently in those 3 classes?
We're sitting at about 3, it varies per class, but we're about 350 a class. Okay.
I'm sorry, just 2 quick questions for you.
Yeah.
So the key takeaway I had from here is regardless of what site you look at, there's a couple things that are just going to be a challenge. One is the transition, going from current to new and managing that transition over a period of time, because you need a footprint to do that. The second is the logistics around all, what's required within the buildings. I think there's nobody in this room that would say that any school here has the right logistics and parking and whatnot. So my question for you is, so this is my first question. When you looked at all the sites, okay, based on the available usable space, is there any site that you could build on, brand new, without any transition or disruption?
No.
Okay, so my second question is...
You're asking me in terms of the sites that Loveland currently...
Yeah, the 6 sites that we have today.
Yes,
So my second question is, you mentioned the state has basically said they will not co-fund any investment into 2 schools.
Correct.
So if we build those 2 new schools, 2-part question. One is, how much will the state fund? And then 2, do you have any perspective as to, when you compare the future operating costs to the current operating costs, I'm assuming that success is operating costs should go down.
Yes.
Do you have any perspective on that?
I don't know, I can't give you a direct percentage because there's so many things that weigh into that. Yes, in theory, your operating costs go down because new buildings are so much more efficient than older buildings. When you look at the costs from a mechanical system standpoint in older buildings versus the cost for our new buildings that we're designing, they go significantly down. Now, the flip side of that is we're adding power into our buildings because we have one-to-one with our kids, and every kid is bringing a device that needs to be charged that our older buildings, quite frankly, can't accommodate.
Sure.
So there's additional power and they're bigger buildings. So from a cost per square foot level.
We're navigating an aircraft carrier. And
Right.
The precision is going to be tough, but the reason I asked that question is, as a board, I think it's going to be extremely important to mesh the 2, to give people perspective on, okay, we're asking for permanent improvement and operating, and they work together, they overlap. So I think, to help make a decision on one versus the other, it would be extremely helpful, in my opinion, to have that understanding, because whether I'm right or not, my expectation would be operating expenses should go down as a result of spending this type of money.
Yep. To answer your other question, because you would ask what percentage would OFCC, would the state be co-funding? Right now, we are looking, OFCC has Loveland at a 20% rebate. You would be getting 20% back on whatever you build. Am I correct? 21.
That was factored into
Sorry.
the original levy?
No, it can't be.
It can't.
Because
It's money afterwards. that
You get
you
after-
use on
yes,
this
we will get that money later from the state.
When you
We are-
say "we," is it we?
Loveland.
No,
Or is it-
Loveland.
No, it's that.
It's-
Loveland will,
you-
the school district will get that back later
Okay.
from the state.
Okay.
Those dollars could be used to go towards another building project.
No, I just mean,
Or, yes, or those dollars can go to paying down the bond.
Yeah.
It goes back to the school.
Yes, it goes 100%, yes, that 100 all goes back to the schools.
Can I ask a question on this? OFCC requirements. My question would be, if we build on that, is the OFCC going to give us the rebate, the 21% rebate on that site based on their requirements?
They will. They don't require a certain size site. They suggest, they say, our standard is, hey, district, if you're going out and looking for property and you want to build a new elementary, the site that we would recommend would be X size. Okay, so they're not going to tell you that you have to go buy new property to build.
Could it later become a requirement?
Not that I'm aware of.
And these estimates are they considering the cost of the land in this? These are just the costs for the buildings that we're talking about. So we're
Correct.
looking at another $7+ million on top of whatever we come up with.
This is land we are.
Right now, everything I'm showing you is using land that you guys currently have.
So if we went somewhere else, it would be
You would be having to purchase land, yes,
for 70.
agreed.
So 500 foot, right, about a third of the property currently is a bus depot in a sense, whatever you call it, right?
I believe
I'm just saying, maybe 30%.
How many, 6 acres?
Maybe 6 acres.
I think the transportation facility takes up 6 acres.
Okay, third. So a third of the property currently is bus facilities. The rest of it has how many students on it, ballpark?
Students right now inside LES, LPS.
So ballpark the same number of students.
There's 3.5 grades there. So there's a little more than that. They're probably close to 1,200 on the site maybe
So
right
certainly
now.
the footprint of the building is significantly smaller than the roof over combination of 3 different buildings.
The footprint that I'm showing of the new building is probably a little bit smaller than the footprint of the spread out one, but that's because the footprint is assuming that it's a 2-story building, where right now only a small piece of LES, LPS is 2-story.
We're saying the other place where you're displacing the buses is going to be green space for,
We need playgrounds, it's playground space.
Playground
It's the
space that
playground
they don't
space
have
that we
today.
lose. No, this playground space equates to about the same exact playground space that exists right now. It's just this pretend layout, again, nothing's been designed. So this diagram suggests that where the playgrounds currently exist are going to be taken up by driveway parking or new buildings. So we need to find a new home for the playground. And again, ideally, when you're designing the schools, that would be behind the building from a safety security standpoint as opposed to in front. Okay? I'm going to move on to the early childhood site. So here's an aerial of the early childhood.
Question.
Sorry.
Has this property been appraised?
Yes.
I guess it's for you guys probably more than.
Yes, it has been.
It has been. What was the?
Let's see.
While you're looking that up, I will continue. So we'll move on to the early childhood center site. There's the aerial of that. Again, when we're taking a look at the existing site, this site has a little bit of fussiness to it. There's quite a bit of grade change across this site, hence why you actually enter on one floor and the lower level exits a grade down. So there's significant contours on this site. There's some detention on the storm detention areas on this site as well. When you're looking at the most ideal spot to put a new building, again, the building is built where it is because it's the spot that you should build a building on the site. So the new building really needs to go where the existing building is. It does have significantly more square footage to it, because again, right now, this building has PKK and part of one. In the future, I believe it is the desire to have full-day kindergarten if possible. So any new building that we would propose on this site, we would like to make sure that we can fit full-day kindergarten. So this footprint is a 3-story footprint, okay? So it is a fairly vertical building to be able to fit PKK and all of first grade on this site, okay? So what does that diagrammatically look like? This is a stab. Again, the building was designed kind of how the site makes sense. So it's a similar layout to what exists right now. With the additional kids, we do need more buses than what currently exists there now. We would need more parking spots than what currently exists there now. We want to do our best to separate the parent from the bus drop-off. This gets us pretty much there with this layout. You can see the area where I marked, you can see the mouse. This is all very contoured slope and grade change. There's also a lot of trees in this area. And there's detention on this back side of the site. And that detention obviously is going to need to increase because we're increasing the amount of water detention, not student detention. It's not the ISS green space.
Christy, have we done any sort of numbers or assessment on what the cost would be where you have it labeled considerable grade change?
I don't know what the cost would be to build the building in that spot.
To be able to expand over that way.
I don't know what the cost is, other than you're probably introducing significant retaining walls in there. I don't know. I don't have a specific cost number. I can tell you that there's really no spot to put a new building of this size anywhere on the property where it wouldn't touch the existing building that's already there. There isn't really a way to take this new building and shove it in a corner and be able to build it on this site while keeping the existing building in place with the kids in it. It really just isn't physically possible or safe in terms of what would be needed for construction entrances and construction traffic.
Can we put trailers along in that green space while we build, if we were to put a whole school?
I am going to tell you no, because you need as much of this site as possible literally to construct the building.
So we have
First of all, it's extremely swampy in that spot. It's why nothing was built there in the first place. But second, knowing how they built the building and the construction trailers, the construction parking, the lay down space, the construction access to and from, I would not recommend trying to squeeze modulars on this site while construction. And I don't think we'd be able to fit the number of modulars that we need, and I'll get there to that in just a minute.
Could I ask a question real quick? Is there a increase or decrease in cost for busing transportation if they're going to two, like this building and the other building, as opposed to going to one building like Grailville area? Is there a busing increase or decrease in cost?
May I think about that for a minute?
Sure.
Is your question?
Yeah. I was just curious, I know it's 3-story, could it go higher, are we limited because we're in residential, or what's the rule there?
I don't know the answer to that. I would have to look at the zoning. I can't remember what the height is. You are in residential. The footprint wouldn't get significantly smaller. And the reason I say that is that, so what you see that is actually 3 stories is this U shape right here. Because what you see in front is all of your big volume spaces that really don't get a story above them. It's gym, it's cafeteria, yeah. And so while if we went 4 stories, you might be able to shorten those academic wings a little bit, but you're going to lose some efficiencies. The other point to that is when we are designing early elementary buildings for our youngest learners, ideally we wouldn't even be 3-story. The reality is we try and get them at 1 story for the little kids. 2-story is kind of the highest we want to go. And that's mostly a safety issue and a travel issue for the kids during the day. It's really cumbersome to ask a kindergartner, preschooler, or 1st grader to try and maneuver a 4-story building.
Yeah, I was just trying to think out of the box, maybe
Right,
even pre-K
right.
through 1 doesn't end up on this compound. We did things in phases because obviously we're limited to our
Right.
funds. You know, like how high could we go?
Correct.
What other grade
Right.
combinations could have been?
Right, right.
As far as transportation, currently we do 3 tiers. There's high school, middle school, tier 1, elementary, primary is tier 2, and then LECC is the 3rd tier. So there's not a lot of children at LECC. I believe there's 14, maybe 15 buses there. So if we switched everything to be on 1 campus, that 3rd tier would go away. So maybe 45 minutes times 14 buses, and they would then go over to drop off at the 1 large campus. So it's not a massive savings, but it is somewhat of a savings.
So then they would start, the schools would have like the same start and end time, and then everybody would be filling up the bus?
We have talked about that many times, and one of the things is kindergartners. How early do you want to bring kindergartners in? Do you want them coming in separately from the rest of the children? If you've got, let's say, 1st through 5th grade, a lot of people get nervous having kindergartners on the buses with those 5th graders. Yeah, so they could come in all together. Timing, it would be fine, but it just depends on how that small group of children works.
Yeah. If you are cutting like 1 route instead of 2, have an extra adult on the bus, but the little kids in the front.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I'm sure you've seen how many buses go past your houses on a daily basis, because there are the parochials, there's the high school, there's the middle school. So there's probably 5 buses go past your house right now to pick up kids.
Yeah,
So it would definitely reduce that.
Yeah.
It would take a lot of rerouting to get there, but yes, it's going to reduce that number.
Let me keep chugging along because I'll get to the implications here in a second. This just again shows you that shadow of where the existing building sits. The red dashed area, when you're on that site, there's a heavily wooded buffer in the back. So I just wanted, with this being in a residential, there is a 40-yard or 40-foot easement that needs to be a landscape buffer no matter what. But I did just want, if you're familiar with the site and have been on the site, you'll see how this plan does start to encroach on that just a little bit, just in order to get the sheer number of buses that we might need on this site. So what are the implications with this? So as we said, it's a 3-story building, where normally we would prefer a 1 or a 2-story. This OFCC, the state suggested site size for 760 kids would be 17.6 acres, where this is a 12-acre site. And so you see some of that tightness when you look at the layout. A prime example is in order to get, in this layout, in order to get to the service side of the building, you have to drive through the bus lot to get there. So there's a little bit of overlap that has to happen on a site this small. When it comes to traffic flow, where ideally you would start to separate some of that on a larger site. The other thing that's a little bit smaller on this site is the playground area. So the area that's going to be left for playground that you see is actually a little bit less than what already exists there. So when you look at the amount of playground space that right now is at LECC, they have a pretty large hard surface play area and in a pretty large mulched area. Once we put a larger footprint building on that site, that's going to shrink a little bit. And those 2 ball fields, I don't know how much use those 2 ball fields even get, but there are 2 ball fields on the back of that site, and we would lose those 2 ball fields in the process of doing this as well. And again, in terms of future expansion, we've pretty much maxed out the site at this point. So if we do see a large enrollment bump, that growth is going to need to happen. We'll go somewhere else.
I don't know if you know the answer to this question. Do you happen to know the square footage? You've got 103,000 square foot building new. Do you happen to know what the current square footage is? We probably had it somewhere.
Right, it's in the 40s.
I think it's 42,000, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it was between 40 and 50,000. And again, when we did the assessment of LECC, and when we talked about do we try and keep this building or do we replace it, one of the big issues with this building is the size of the classrooms and really the size of every single space in this building is very undersized, especially for a kindergarten, pre-KK. In pre-KK, you're ideally looking at 1,100 to 1,200 square feet per classroom. This building, every classroom is 750 to 800 square feet. And if you've been in it, you've seen the gym size. You've seen the cafeteria that also is sometimes a music room. That's also sometimes lots of things. So yeah, the new building going in its place is more than twice the square footage of what the existing building is. Okay, so those are the implications for building on LECC. So then what are the phasing implications? And we started to talk about this when you guys started asking about modulars. So the reality is as soon as we demo either LECC or the elementary side of LES, LPS, we need swing space, what we call swing space for the kids for 2 years. When we map this out, the least obtrusive way to handle swing space would be to actually build out LECC first, because you're displacing fewer kids in that first phase. Okay, so you would pull those kids out of LECC. We do need a modular campus somewhere, and that's an issue because right now we really do not have any property that can hold what we are assuming is going to be maybe about 15 modulars. There's not a site. There isn't Loveland property that's currently available to hold those modulars. So we need that swing space for the enrollment of LECC, which is about 350 kids. There's a few things we could look at. If there was a vacant school somewhere in a neighboring district that could be rented, great. Mason did it. I don't know that there are any vacant schools close by where you guys would be okay with your kids getting bused to that school for those 2 years. So that is one option if it's available. We could look at alternate locations for preschool, whether it's in neighboring churches or something like that. That doesn't solve our kindergarten issue necessarily, and it doesn't solve the portion of first graders that are in this building. And then the third option is the use of modulars or the use of trailers. Our kind of quick math suggests that we would probably need about 14 trailers to make that happen. Now that means though that you still probably don't have a cafeteria and you don't have a gym for those 2 years that those kids are on that modular campus. When you look at the costs for that, there's a lot of things that go into having to set up a temporary modular complex. There's the rent of the trailers themselves, and John knows these numbers pretty well because you guys have some modulars on some of your sites. So the rent for a trailer is $9,000 a year. So the quick math means we're going to spend $500,000 for 4 years. Now you're going to ask me, why do we need it for 4 years? Because we have 2 buildings we need to build. Okay, so for the first 2 years, we're going to house the kids that are sitting in LECC. And then the next 2 years, we're gonna solve our next construction process. It's either that or you're doubling the size of your modular campus all at once, and all of those kids are vacating into a considerably larger modular campus somewhere, okay? So there's about $500,000 for the trailer rent, and then, but all those trailers have utilities that need to go to them. So there's a lot of site and utility prep, whether that is water, whether that's sewer, whether that's electric, all of that needs to be run to those trailers. And again, we have a good idea of the cost of that because you guys already have modulars on some of your sites. So understanding the cost that you guys have incurred in the past and translating that here to the 14 trailers, we're looking at another about $1.25 million in the site utilities. On top of that, we have, depending upon where these modulars would go, and again, we don't know where they would go, chances are there's a paving project that needs to go along with them. Because you're gonna need to get buses to them, you're gonna need to park cars at them, and there's a playground piece to that as well. You're gonna wanna make sure that your kids can actually go outside and play during those 2 years. So not really, I mean, again, some of these numbers are a total estimate because we have no idea what the site logistics literally are, but I would say it's safe to say we have about another $500,000 in paving and playground costs. Some other unknowns, because we don't know where they would go, I don't know if there's some unforeseen weird utility issue or zoning ordinance or traffic issue with regards to where this site would finally be located. Okay, and then as I said before, we're not really sure how the lunch cafeteria is done at this site. You're not going to build a whole school kitchen at a modular complex. Obviously, the ideal scenario, but if we don't have enough property to do it, would be to set up a modular campus on the site of one of your existing schools. That's the ideal scenario. Then you have a kitchen that's right there that maybe you can share, and a gym that's right there that maybe you can share. But there's not space for it at the high school, and there's not space for it here with regards to knowing what all the existing utilities and infrastructure are.
Just, were all those dollars included in the projected cost of this project? All that, the money was laid out?
No, so are you talking about the master plan, the bond levy?
Yeah.
No, because the bond levy was assuming new buildings built on Grailville. So you didn't need any of these costs because you're able to, if we have a new clean site, we're building all of these new buildings right at once, right out of the gate. No kids have to swing into trailers, and you don't have that additional phasing cost.
Just hypothetically, the first property that we looked at across from the, in the new downtown, right? The hockey stick building. What's that? LES. Whichever one is the LES, right?
Yeah.
That building doesn't need to be touched. Is there a cafeteria and other infrastructure in that building? It looks like
There will be kids in that building. When LECC is being built, that building is fully occupied by the kids that are already occupying that building.
Right, so you're talking about doing it in phases, so doing this one first.
Yeah.
So leave that building stand.
Yes.
When you're building the other one.
That is correct.
Then you wouldn't have as many. But the other, then, is if you go to the slide that has the LECC.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. You got the
detention?
The retention area off to the left, but it looks like there's trees in a higher area, which you say you need to create. So there's nothing being built or nothing there, right?
That goes down. In that area?
Yeah.
That's all a swale and grade.
Okay. So I was just looking at the aerial, right? But it seems like you could do the similar thing as this building, is take the building that's on the north, extending north, demolish that, put so you got your infrastructure piece remaining. You build the building, the orange building, just cock it 45 degrees with the road or with that access point, leave your structure there. Put and parking lot behind it, put all your portables, you got your infrastructure for your center infrastructure, you got half the building that's still a school, you put the portables behind it, so you keep your infrastructure right there, and you got it. And you just build this building where the north leg is. So in essence, you take all those other extenuating costs by half.
What about the safety of all the kids around all that construction?
I thought she was saying when it's already at 12 acres and suggested is 17.6 acres, you're bunching in all these kids plus all of the construction itself. I think that just right there with logistics and infrastructure itself, like, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I mean,
that would be.
There's just not a lot of land at LECC, and if you've, because I've played on all those ball fields, that's like a swamp valley of death right there.
You don't want any.
Unfortunately.
It is, which is why the building exists where it exists on the site. The building exists on the high point, what you wouldn't want to do is build a building in the valley where all of your road is coming in up high, and your building's sitting down in the, what did you call it, the valley of death? the wet area. But you know, could you shoehorn all of this in on this site? I'm not saying it's impossible, but my concerns are safety and ultimate final product at the end of the day that you're happy with, and making sure that the building goes where it is going to be best, where it's going to best serve you long term, and not build it in an unfortunate spot on the site that you have to live with for the next 50 years.
Can I ask one more question about this plan? I don't see anything addressed about the 5th grade. So you're saying if this all happens, 5th grade is still at this building, which is a space problem as is and will continue to be going forward. So is there a projection of, I mean, do we have space around here for trailers for these kids? Do we have, okay.
No.
So what, okay.
No, this option, if in my professional opinion, if Loveland does not purchase additional property, 5th grade needs to stay in this building.
Right, no, I hear you. I'm just wondering.
There is not enough property on these other 2 pieces to allow 5th grade to move out. So you will still have classrooms inboard in this building that do not have exterior windows. You have an entire grade level that sit in the inside. So some of the reason, when we went through the master planning with the community, some of the reasons why they asked for 5th grade to be moved out is to be able to solve some of those issues that currently exist in this building with.
I think it's overcrowding as well. It'll just continue, yeah.
Okay, so from beginning to end.
Yes.
How long does this?
Okay, so let me go through the phasing. Let me go through this. Thank you for bringing me back on track.
Yeah.
Appreciate
it. Got a lot to do.
Yes. Okay, so phasing of this. We start with LECC, okay? So we need to relocate those kids. We already talked about this. They need, most likely they need modulars to go into. Where those modulars are, I'm not sure. And I walked through the numbers of the cost for those modulars. Phase 2, so once the new building is completed on LECC campus, now you can move those pre-KK kiddos back in, the 1st graders that were on that site back in, but you can also pull the 1st graders that are sitting at LES LPS out of there and into this new building. Okay, that's why it was important to do this one first, because it means our swing space needs for phase 2, we aren't trying to find swing space for a full 2 grade worth of kids, because 1st grade moves out. So now we have LPS sitting there, because we only have to demo LES to build a new building. So now we can funnel 2 grades into LPS while it's still sitting on the site. That could be keeping 2nd grade in there and moving 3rd grade over. That would mean 4th grade would need to move to that modular campus. Or it could be 3rd and 4th are in the primary and 2nd grade moves out to the modulars. I don't care. It's the same number of little bodies that need to move out onto the modular campus, and it's about the same number of bodies that we pulled out of LECC. Okay, so the modular campus is the same. It's the same size as needed for both phases. Okay. So that's why when we talked about the modular campus, the rent on it, it would be 4 years that we would need that in place, okay? Now, we do have to build the new building that's sitting on LES LPS 2 years later because we have to wait for LECC to be built. So there is 2 years of escalation that we wouldn't have otherwise had if we had a clean site where we could build all the buildings at once. So what does that 2 years of escalation equate to on the building, on the new building going on the LES site? Assuming 3.5% escalation, which is what we typically use, you're looking at about 2.75 million in escalation because we had to delay the construction of that building, okay? So you have the modular campus, you have the escalation in this building, and we do have to remember that we have to relocate the transportation facility in order to make this happen as well. So right now, we don't have a property for that transportation facility, so we need to find a property to put the transportation facility, and we need to construct the transportation facility. I don't know exactly what the cost of the transportation facility is going to be. I've worked with a lot of districts, and those transportation facilities can range depending upon what all you want there. My guess is you're probably between 5 and 6 million to build a new transportation facility. But I don't know. We have not worked through the logistics of exactly what that looks like, and I would say that does not include the property acquisition needed to build the transportation facility. Yes, sir?
Yeah, I just want to throw it on the table that building a new transportation facility might not be necessary if we outsource busing. Just throwing it on the table. Get rid of the liability of busing our own students, and we all know the repercussions of running kids around everywhere. But anyway, I just want to put that on the table.
Reduce employee costs too, since we're heavy employees.
Most districts that do transport or contract keep the buses in the district, so they would have to go somewhere. Yeah, I understand.
Well, first student is more than capable of doing that,
Yeah.
not having a house.
There's a property at Kemper as well. That's right.
Yeah, that's not an argument.
Yep.
Just consider that business point that we outsource our busing. Okay?
So total cost premiums due to the phasing, whether it's the modular complex, the cost escalation, or the transportation facility, you can see that that is about 10 to 11 million. Take the transportation out, and you're sitting at about 5 million due to the phasing and the escalation. So that's what I have for you, board, in terms of showing you what it looks like.
I just wanted to answer the question about the appraisal on Loveland Junior. So we had a range, so they obviously talked about whether or not the buildings were sold as is, but the land value is just under 2.8 million. So if you do the math on it, it's 117,500 per acre.
And that could be, the school district could pick who that would be, and they could potentially bring in more commercial tax revenue.
Yes, I mean, just a real quick refresher on how it works. So when the school sells land with buildings on it, they have to go through a bidding process. And the first thing they have to offer it up to is other schools, private schools, charter schools. So they get first rights to it, if you will, and it's Ohio Revised Code. And the question always comes up, can they offer $20 for it? And it has to be some sort of fair market value. If there is not somebody within that group that's willing to purchase it for some sort of fair market value, then you can move on and you do bid it out, but you can bid it out to commercial use, basically anybody at that point.
You can all, it also does not have to be a sale, correct? You can do some kind of land lease or?
Yeah, there's other potential options.
That was just for one property, there's two though, right?
Yes, we actually did not get an appraisal for the other property.
That's the LECC property?
Correct.
Okay. What's acreage, what is that, like 40 acres, 30 acres?
LECC was smaller.
Oh, I was way off. I was like, many places. Okay.
So
12 acres. All right, I know.
Not that it helps a lot, I think Dusty Road has, Claremont County, Claremont County. What is it? Thank you. So they have it on the books at like 1.7 or something like that, but they also have the property down the hill at like 7.5 or something like that, so, yeah.
$1 million-ish.
If you want to cut it in half.
Well, that's what the appraisal that we have that would include the buildings is closer to what the actual appraisal is from the Hamilton County auditor's site. So they're appraising land plus buildings. So I'm giving you a lower of the figure, but it's still relatively.
Go ahead.
Just real quick, so the analysis, that was really helpful, looking at the existing property from a feasibility perspective. If we look at, and I know there wasn't a super detailed plan created for what would be built from the Grailville property perspective, but given like those state guidelines, if you put this many students in a building, how much land do you need? Like ballpark, there's 110 acres in Grailville. How much would actually be needed, if you will, from a school perspective, based on?
That is a good question.
51.5.
51? Okay.
51.5.
Or somewhere around there. Okay.
Maybe somewhere around
Exactly.
50. I
Is that elementary or high school, or does it matter?
It does matter,
So
because
what is that?
the state standard looks at whether you're an elementary, a middle, or a high school, and they assess different acreage requirements depending upon what age level you are.
Suggestions, please.
So it's not necessary, I would need to run some numbers. It's not a quick math.
Those numbers came from Dr. Krause's 912 presentation.
Okay.
Was that
And
separate
I ran the
buildings?
numbers at some point, and I came up with 51.
Okay.
I just don't have them in
We use
front of
the
me.
That's fine. It doesn't
Sorry.
have to be exact. I
Right.
was just curious
Right.
approximately. Thank you.
For the rebuilds of the buildings, does that just kind of get us up to par of what we are right now as far as what we need for the students that we currently have?
Yeah,
'Cause
from a
say
size-wise
somebody-
standpoint, it assumes zero enrollment growth.
Right, so if somebody bought like
You're pretty much,
70 acres of land
Yeah.
that's for sale, and put a bunch of new houses with
Yeah.
families that just
Yeah.
sprouted children, we'd be in the same position we are right now in like 10 years.
yes.
Oh, like tomorrow.
Quite faster than that.
Right.
So what we need is, if we have one building, 51 and a half-ish acres, right? Grailville, I think, I've heard a lot on social media, it's pretty big, right? About twice the size. Are there other sites that are available in the district or right next to it that could be annexed, even if they're not for sale right now, that could fit the bill that's closer to 51 and a half?
You did the land, and you looked at all the available land. You want to answer that?
Yes, we looked at all the pieces of land. The Hoffman Farm is 160 acres. That's up in Miami Township across from the Kroger. That is not for sale. That will never be for sale. We've been told
We would
that.
not recommend you call it and ask. Just a suggestion.
There were a couple of other areas. I will say we actually did look at Phillips Park to see if we could talk to the city, and we actually walked the site, and acreage-wise is pretty good, but it drops down into a valley 100 feet down, right past the soccer field, so that didn't work. There's a few other sites, but all of them were very small. And there's one that is in Goshen Township, but it is caught up in and I don't remember the term, a trust between 4 or 5 different family members that are not interested in dealing with it at all. So those are the only sizable pieces that we could have purchased. So that's why we ended up where we're at.
Thanks.
And then there's renting options, correct? Leasing? There's lease options as well?
Oh, for
Land property for the transportation.
Transportation, I'm sorry. Honestly, I will tell you, I have not, there was one place I actually looked at for a transportation facility. It's down on River Road.
Yeah. 10,090.
It was big enough just to fit the buses, the fleet that we have. There was no place for any cars to park. probably quarter mile up the road, the bus drivers would have had to park and then walk down to the lot, but that's the only place. And please remember, nobody wants a bus garage in their backyard. The beeping at 5:30 in the morning is not something anybody wants. So where we're currently at is, it works, and there's very few other places that we would. And it has been brought up, are you going to put the buses on Grailville? We have no intention, nobody ever had any intentions of doing that.
Is it fair to say, I'm just looking at the temporary modular complex and the construction cost escalation phase. I'll even give you the fact that take out the 5 to 6 million on the new transportation. That's $5 million in some costs that we never get back, correct? 5 million in some costs that we never get back if we use that plan and use existing sites, correct?
Yes.
5 million. Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
Now, I will say that I based the estimates for preparing the site for those modulars based upon what I just recently did over at LECC. And then we cut that price by, I think, half.
Right.
Because there is obviously...
There's going to be an economy of scale.
Economy of scale, big time. So we really lopped the price down, but there's still... Sewer has to go to every single modular because little bodies can't run down or out the door and somewhere else. Water, fire alarms, technology, electricity. There's a whole lot of things that go to making those units safe and usable. So it's just a very expensive endeavor.
The other question, just the public thing. The cost of Grailville property right now, as in the contract, is 7.7 million. Is that correct?
As would be cash price.
And okay, so I'm just looking at
Can you
this.
say
based
more?
on-
Because I feel like you have a thought and I'm
Yeah,
interested
so
in hearing it.
here's where I'm at. I'm just looking at simple math here. And looking at the prices and trying to make a logical decision here. We have $5 million in cost to just build on the existing sites as is.
If not more. Yeah.
And some costs that we never get back. We have on the option, on option to temporarily purchase an asset that is an asset that at some point in time, if we decide we don't need or isn't the plan that the community wants, we can sell. And sell to whomever we want and maybe make a profit on it. It's an investment. The land is in need. It's a limited resource. I'm looking at 7 million, 7.7 million, and 5 million in some costs on using the existing properties. That's a net $2.7 million. And tonight, we're not talking about what we're doing. We're just talking about exercising the right to purchase an asset that we can then dispose of, and potentially, if we only need 50-some acres, sell that off at a profit, which to me, this is where the rubber meets the road, and we're just trying to make a decision on what to do tonight with the purchase of an asset. And I want to keep saying an asset because it has value. Even though there might be some cost in purchasing that, it has value, of which we could sell potentially and do what we want with and maybe make a profit on. But if we don't move on that option, I don't see how that temporarily hurts us. Yes, is there a little bit of a cost? But I'm looking at this right there tonight, just the 5 million, not the cost of even building the new transportation. You say 10, 11 million, half that cost, we can agree on that's we're never getting back. That to me is looking at the cost of land. That is something that we should be considering here tonight.
Well, we don't know how this is paid for. We know how Grailville will be paid for. Grailville robs the permanent improvement levy that's already been voted on, and it's financed over 30 years. We're not saying this is fine. So what's 8 million, Mr. Holly, what's 8 million roughly financed over 30 years? What's that come to?
I mean, I don't have a...
30, maybe 4%.
Okay, to your point,
$15,900,000.
So, but I would also say,
So
if I'm
that's a lot
purchasing,
more than 5.
But if I'm purchasing a house, I'm not gonna pay for it all upfront. So I'm okay with a 30-year.
You're also not gonna buy 6 acres if you only need 3. If the bank only says.
Yeah, but
might
at that point, if I
could
could
sell 3
I can sell 3 and probably sell 3.
But that's if you're using your own money. Now you're using everyone else's money and saying, oh, down the road,
So-
they, or the people that replace them.
That's what we're here for, is to talk about.
No, I know, and I'm
think
offering
the
a
concept-
counterpoint.
I think the concept is right. I think the other side of that coin is long-term cost crushes people, okay? And so while I agree with your concept, I don't agree with it in the context of 30 years because things change, all right? Now, if the board would come back and say, hey, I understand why I have to buy 110 acres because that's all they're selling it in, but I don't need it. Therefore, in the short term, and define the short term, 3 years, you know, I'm going to go do something with it. I think that's the conversation that people need to hear. Is like, what is, you know, why? She just walked us through a plan that says at most, including future expansion, you need 50 acres, but you want to buy 110, of which less than half of what's remaining is actually usable. So how do you, so again, your asset concept, agree with the concept, but you're going to have to, like, the value, how you value that remaining. And then, so I'm sorry, I'll finish one more thing. And then the second thing is that I think the conversation then needs to get to, okay, I get it. Land is not available. Transition time stinks. Length of time stinks. Again, long-term time costs money. All right, so how do you, what I would like to see is, so how do you get it all done in 2 years? And what's the price tag for that? And including, if I only need 50, what am I going to do with the remaining? How am I going to shed existing assets that are worth a couple $1 million? And why do I need to build 3 buildings when we just saw 2?
Right, exactly. Great.
So those are the questions that I think the focus should be put on. Not should we or shouldn't we?
There is one piece with these elementary buildings that they are not planning for any growth at all. They're not allowing for any growth. In other words, they have been designed tonight or in the past week.
The site can accommodate, the site doesn't really accommodate any more than just
Justify 3 buildings versus 2, right?
Yeah, I mean, and while there was a master plan that shows 3 buildings, I'm not sure that we necessarily had said we absolutely have to have 3 buildings. There could, you know, it was a plan to show what was possible. But what this does.
Exactly what it said. But it's a possibility.
No, but that's fair.
Exactly what it said.
It showed 3 buildings, that's what I said. But we did not have a construction plan that was for sure 3 separate buildings. It is possible that 2 of those buildings could have been connected in some way. That's all I was just saying now. My only point I'm trying to make about this plan is it does not allow for any pupil growth. It does not, on those sites, allow for any growth in those buildings. Whereas the plan that was presented allowed for buildings that did allow for that growth, that did allow a plan for students that was more than what we currently have.
No, Dr. Allen, I hear you.
That was the only piece that wasn't mentioned in this discussion.
I hear you, but when I added up the acreage needs, it came up to 30.
Oh, I understand all of the pieces. All I'm
so
saying is that the option of not buying land and building on the current land, the only thing that wasn't mentioned was that it didn't provide for any extra space. It was absolutely shoehorning things in.
John, I think the difference between the 38 and the 50 probably is 2 things: a little bit of enrollment growth and the 5th grade moving over is probably the difference. So I think
you need more.
Yeah. So what I think I hear you saying is, though, and I don't know the gentleman, Craig. So what you're saying is you understand Craig's logic. However, you would like to see, if we purchase the land, okay, what would we do with the additional acreage that we don't need? And is there a commitment to say the land that is no longer going to be needed at LECC and LPS? Is there a commitment of how the proceeds for that?
Yeah.
Now, the hard part is just like, the Grail said, who is the buyer going to be? I mean, I think LECC, I don't know enough about zoning, but I would think somebody would just knock that and build houses right there, but I have no idea.
I would
So-
hope that houses get built.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
but I think that would be.
But remember, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
remember, what motivated the Grail was their mission, not
Right.
their.
Yeah, we're in a different spot, yeah. We're not gonna put whatever you were talking about.
Private prison or
The only other thing that
What we can do with the land, once we purchase the land, or is it only when there are buildings that you have to go to?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So the law, the way the law is read out is the fact that if there's a building, then you have to offer it up for schools first. If there's no building on it, so let's say hypothetically, even you build and then you split off a portion of it, it's just raw land, and you don't have to go through the same procedure. You still would bid it out, but it would be to whomever at that point.
But then the revenue from any of those sales would go towards buying down the money that we owe, so then it might shorten the 7 years, or?
Yeah, so I think that was that seems to me to be a big sticking point, is that if we sell the LPS land and we sell the LECC land and we sell 25 acres at Grailville, what happens to that money? Do we say, well, maybe it's used to pay down the bond, or do we say it will be used to pay down the bond? Right? Or maybe it will be used for something else, or can we tell people that when these things are sold, or is that not a thing that that the district is comfortable committing to?
Well, I think that was part of the problem with the last levy, is
Yeah, that's
all
what
of
I'm
those
saying.
details are missing. So I think if
They
you
won't
said
commit to it.
specifically like,
that's
this is the plan, we're gonna buy 110 acres, we're gonna sell 85 of it, we're gonna keep 50, that's $3.5 million. The property we already have is worth 2.8, the LECC is worth $1 million. We basically can make it a wash from a land. Like if you just outlined those specifics, it would be so, much more meaningful.
Can we say that?
Agreed.
Well, I think that's how people want to
So we asked that question. So forgive me if sometimes I sound annoyed, because we sat in the office and asked these questions.
I know you
to
did,
last
that's why I
night.
brought it up again.
They will not commit to paying down the
Well, but
bond.
We just
Can
asked
they,
them, they're
or
there.
will they
Can they
not?
just, they're there. You asked the question, right? Who were you asking that
I
question?
just
to?
asked it.
Board. And they're there, right?
I'll do it again. Here we go.
Yeah.
So, clearly, I would, if that is what you would want to do, right?
Right.
If one thing I've learned in 8 years on the school board, nothing's easy, okay? So if I'm gonna make you a promise, I keep that promise, right? I can't make a promise that I am not certain that I can keep. That's all there is to it. If all things being equal, if we receive that money and that money's there, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you pay it down, right?
There seems
But
to be lots of
then let's say we get in that situation, and here we are, we've got that money, and clearly, to the benefit of this community, there's something we could do that helps the community as a whole more. But I gotta say, I'm sorry, I can't do that because I promised you I wouldn't.
Right.
It's like, if I make a promise to my wife, I'm making sure I'm keeping it, right? So it's the same thing with the community. If I make you a promise, I'm sticking to it.
And that's for lots of reasons, I'm guessing, because who knows who's gonna be sitting here in 8 years, right? And that's a scary thing to think about with our money and to invest it, right? And if something were to happen in another building and we have a new need, would that money be used for that, right? That's what people are worried about, I think.
I would love for the words to be able to come out of my mouth and say that so you guys could hear that, but it sure as hell, I'll say it, and a few years down the road, I'll have to break that promise for whatever stupid reason the state or the feds or whoever come up with, right? So I'm not doing it. That's not who I am.
It would all be hypothetical too, because like Kevin said, other schools, private schools, or I don't remember who else, umbrella term.
Can I ask a
Could come
question?
in and
I
bid
feel
on
like
it.
along the way, we find out lots of rules and regulations that most people aren't aware of. Are there restrictions on a public school district in the sale of property that they own, as far as what they can do with that money? There are all sorts of laws I don't know anything about,
So that would help to some of the conversation as well, is if the land were sold it has to be used for capital purposes. So, I'm just throwing out there, if for some reason enrollment increased exponentially, we had to add on to a building, then that money could be utilized for that. If that was not a need that was required, then it could be used towards paying down debt service. So that it is restricted as well.
So it feels a little bit like it's becoming like a government thing where everybody just puts their special interests in. But is there a possibility to say that if enrollment, I'm just throwing something out, like if enrollment increases by more than 4% over the projections, the proceeds would first be used for other buildings needing that. If not, it would be used to pay down. Like, I'm just thinking about, some caveats to it, to say the primary goal is to pay down the debt. But if but you put a caveat in to just kind of protect ourselves that, okay, if enrollment, let's say Hoffman Farm sells, everybody says it's not going to sell. I have no idea. I see the one person, anyways, but if it won't. But if it did sell, we're going to have an enrollment issue if it's sold to a developer, a big time one. So I'm just thinking about, is there a way to put that in, that if there's a clause that if there's a certain amount of growth, it could go to that. Otherwise, it's used to pay down the debt.
It's interesting. People talk about one property selling. Has there been any new houses built or any new apartments built in Loveland in the last 10 years?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It sounds like we're saying that it hasn't, because the school enrollment has been flat. Actually, it's down 100 people, right, in the last 10 years. Okay, so I'm saying yes, it could happen that you could have a property sell and people will move into it. Okay, but the past history is that new apartments are built, new housing developments are built in Loveland, and our enrollment is flat. Is that the correct statement, Art? Our enrollment is flat last 10 years?
Last 10 years.
Down 100, actually, right? So all that development that we've seen in the last 10 years, our enrollment is flat. Why is that, right? It's because people homeschool, that people go to St. Columban, or they're, anyhow, children's meeting house. Well, I'm talking elementary, since we're talking elementary here. But in any case, they're empty nesters, right?
Okay. So even
Dale,
if it stays flat,
I'm sorry, Dale,
what?
I get that's what history says.
That's what history says.
But that doesn't mean that's what we should
it.
aspire to.
Absolutely, it's like
And I
finance.
think what we're here to solve, I see there's two primary things that we are here to solve. One is that the original levy had a massive affordability issue. So everything you guys are hearing is there's an affordability issue. So we have to run at that problem. The second thing is that we don't like what's happening with the schools, and we want to change that. Which means, by definition, enrollment should go up. So plan for it. That's the way I pragmatically think about it. Now, I'm not saying I'm right and you're wrong. All I'm just saying is, that's why I'm here. I want to change that trajectory. I don't want enrollment to keep declining. But I'm also not going to be convinced that and be swayed, emotionally swayed on the hypothetical that all of a sudden enrollment's going to spike, right? I think we can all estimate what enrollment's going to do. But to me, I think we get back to why we came here. Affordability was a challenge, and we want enrollment to turn around. And what you're hearing from us is just options on how to think about it. At the end of the day, it comes back to you guys. And we're here to help, but that's what I would re-anchor the conversation on, are those two things.
Yeah, yes, you're here to help, okay? But the message is going to come from you. Okay?
Yeah, and I think you hear it loud and clear.
Because supposedly this is...
There's an affordability issue.
Hopefully this is a representative
thing.
And just going to say this somewhere along the line, we're going to hear this is what we want, this is what we're willing to get behind, okay?
So,
and for me personally, that's good.
Do we have to run a levy to purchase the Grailville land? No. We can purchase that with, I know that there's this idea that the permanent improvement money wasn't voted into place for that, to purchase the land, but the permanent improvement money was voted to make permanent improvements on the building, right? So we don't have to like, it's not like we have to run another levy to get to buy the Grailville land. If we can't pass a levy to build new buildings, because that's not even what we're talking about in March, right? So if we at some point can't pass a levy to build new buildings, then we sell the Grailville land, right? I mean, that's like, I'm just like extrapolating out. I don't know why I'm looking at you, I'm looking at all of us, right? Then we sell the land. But if we buy it, then we have it to build on if that's a thing that we decide to do. We don't have to decide what to do with that land right now. It's not going to cost us, am I right in this? It's not going to cost us like a new thing. We're already paying that money, right? What am I missing?
I think Juliet's point is that it is costing money. I mean, I absolutely understand it's costing money, and so the money will come from somewhere. It's that the board has to make a decision about whether or not the district needs land and whether or not to appropriate that money that's not going to go somewhere else.
So if we.
So it's costing something.
If we don't appropriate that levy to the land, I'm asking this question, and we use the permanent improvement money, which can only be used for permanent improvements, we are then,
Things that last 5 years or more.
Right.
Then we are essentially looking to improve buildings that we are looking to eventually tear down. Is that accurate? We all agree that these buildings have to go. I mean, I'm just trying to bring it back to.
There's tomorrow where it's 30 years
Or it
from now.
can be used on technology, it can be used on books.
A good part of it is used on
It can be
technology
used on
today.
things that can be kept, though. It doesn't have to be things that can be torn down.
Fair point. However, at this point, the options to purchase a big enough piece of land to get the buildings on, if we decide to go that way, whether it's a high school or whatever it is,
Yeah.
there's really nowhere else to go. So I understand, while I understand the reasons from a cost perspective why it's a little overwhelming and can be unpalatable to some degree, the reasons to buy it, in my opinion, seem to outweigh the reasons not to buy it. Just because eventually we're going to get to this point, and I would hate to spend money on something that, I would hate to put a new roof on LPS and then knock the new roof down within 10 years.
Right.
That would seem to be a waste of money.
Yeah, that would be a waste of money.
And that's kind of what I want to over. That's where I'm at.
And to me, I would view it as the $5 million is a waste of my money. Not to mention the 4 years of displacement and putting those kids in trailers for 4 years. I just don't think, that's not the community I've lived in for 20 years. It's not the community I come to teach in here recently. I mean, I think that's just a bad optic as well. That's wasting, I mean, there's a net 2.7 mil. How can we close that 2.7 mil to even least, in my mind, make that feasible? Because when I came in here today, I was like, I'm going to listen to why not build on those sites.
Right.
And that cost right there alone drives me to look at other options like that.
Why
I
don't
didn't
you
see
see
this.
the cost that it costs you $3.5 million a year over the next 20 years, 19 years, to maintain our existing buildings?
I'm looking at the reality of the options on the table right now. Like,
That is
all
on
I'm
the
looking
table.
at, all I'm looking at
Literally,
is what's
where
in
we're
front of
sitting
me right
today
now.
on the table, all right, is that the levy didn't pass.
Absolutely.
Right? And so the reality is that we have existing 3 buildings, okay? So the question, and they did this analysis, right? What would it take to maintain the existing campuses? That's not just these 3 buildings, but the middle school and the high school, maintaining all those buildings. And it's, I forget the exact number, 65, 68 million, right?
Christy can answer the question specifically.
I am
65 million.
unclear on what the question is.
No zero
Anyhow,
cost
65 million over 19 years, $3.5 million a year.
I don't have
To
that
maintain the
number off-
existing
I don't have that
buildings.
number off the top of my
Okay,
head.
for 20
We're talking
years.
about the physical building
So you're saying
assessment.
to
I
do
don't have
nothing
that number.
To do
for 20
nothing
years.
costs $3.5 million a year over the next 19 years, right? To do nothing
Yeah.
costs you $3.5 million a year, on average. It's lumpy,
understand. And we'll see a
okay?
decline
But
in
it's not an insurmountable number, okay? And if we need more room, okay, maybe it's a matter of putting on an additional wing on some of these buildings or whatever. But it's not, I understand that we want all new buildings, right? My wife would like it all
No,
new.
Dale, I don't think it's that people want all new buildings. Like, my kids will never go to these schools, ever. right? I think most of us at this table. So it's not that I want new
that's
buildings.
true.
It's what I want for our community, right? And so I don't know how long ago it was that you had kids in the buildings, but they're old. It's not just that they're not nice, they're old. They're not functional, right? Like the people who work in these places every day are giving us information and like they are okay, right? But like if we can do something better and make an investment, I feel like we're not thinking about it.
This is the best report card we've had in years, though, because we focused on improving education, and they're in the same buildings that you're complaining are too old.
But you're also complaining that they're spending more, right? But you're happy that the report cards went up and they're investing.
Some of the things
But you're
they
saying
spent
you want
on,
them
though,
to
were
invest
not-
in the education.
Yes.
But you're complaining about those expenses as
No,
well.
I'm complaining about the expenses they paid that
Infrastructure
didn't go towards education.
But you're just complaining about expenses going up overall.
Yes, I think they've gone up way too much.
So the
compared
build
to
on your concept,
superintendents.
Dale, so 60, do nothing, $65 million.
Over 20 years.
Over 20 years.
And then what?
So is there an option? Is there an option to build the new schools for $65 million?
Yeah.
Yes or no? And you don't have to answer the question
To
today.
build all of your buildings?
To build the 2 new buildings.
Yeah.
Oh, they're less than, they're
I mean, we just did.
less
this-
than.
What's the square foot? Is it 188 square foot? Is that what we're doing this now?
I think 300 on that.
300?
Where's the 50 acres gonna be?
Okay, so what's the total cost? I've lost track.
Angela, let them finish their
Oh, I'm
question.
sorry.
Yeah.
No, I think the concept that you're introducing is right. Do nothing, it's 65, I think it's 0 to 5, 65, $70 million over 20 years, okay? So that's what we have to work with.
I'm assuming that that number that you're throwing out, and again, I don't have the building, I don't have the analysis in
It's
front of
the
me.
slide that was the no zero cost option.
So
that said
so that's
just to
all
maintain.
your buildings. That includes your high school maintenance
I know.
and your middle school maintenance.
some of that-
So those 2 buildings still need to continue to be maintained.
I know.
But, no, the bottom line is when we assessed the primary elementary building and LECC, the numbers came back so high to renovate those that they exceed OFCC's limit and our suggested limit for what you should spend to invest in those existing buildings. That at this point, it is more appropriate to build a new, efficient building for both of those buildings.
I know.
The
problem is the affordability. I mean, 80/20 says they're not going to spend for
Yeah,
that.
that's-
And
that's
Loveland's
what
not
we're gonna
alone
do.
in that. I mean,
Yeah.
Milford, our neighboring districts
Yeah.
are struggling with the same thing. Infrastructure's expensive. We have to think out of the box.
Let me, I know you want to ask a question, but do me a favor, let's keep it inside the group.
Well, no,
That's
this
right.
is actually my money too, in tax.
Well, I know it is, but
So
see,
I'm going to
it's
make a
way-
comment that you don't make an emotional buy Grailville for $7.7 million when the economy as that is high. Don't think that we're going to have a speculative purchase buy and we're going to be able to resell it 2 or 3 years from now if we want to. Property does not sell, contractors do not bid on anything when the economy goes down. I'm telling you, we all know this is the best economy we've experienced probably in my lifetime. Think about that. The recession is not right around the corner, but when is it? We don't need to put $7.7 million towards an emotional buy at the highest price we can.
Why is it emotional?
It's clearly emotional.
So, yeah.
Who's emotional? How's it an emotional? We're all debating it.
It's emotional because you lost 80 to 20. That's why it's emotional.
I voted no, so no, don't go there, buddy. Don't go there. That's not emotional for me. I'm having a discussion, and I'm
sorry. I think what Don is trying to say is, we should only buy Grailville if we plan to use it. We're not in the business.
I agree.
So that's the way I would frame it.
I
to
agree.
everybody.
But if we can't get it passed, it's an asset. They're not making more land.
I got it, but again, we're not in the business of being landowners here.
No, we're not. But we have to have a direction. And I'm not saying it's 100% right. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying this is what I think. Okay? And I'm open to hearing everybody. I'm not emotional. I don't think anybody's emotional. So, and I appreciate everybody's. I love hearing what people have to say because I have neighbors that talk to me and others talk all the time. What's going on? I love to hear what's going on. And I love hearing other people's viewpoint. It's fantastic. It's not just the board saying this is what we're going to do. And If we decide not to buy it, I'm not gonna say, well, this is the worst school district, I'm gonna continue to support it. I'd love, I'm a numbers guy, I look at numbers and I think, if we're building, which I think in the next few years, we're gonna have to do something. We got $5 million of cost that we're never gonna get. We've got, I'm just gonna say $3 million that we can sell of land or buildings. We've already made our money back.
We don't get to make it.
What do you mean?
Ryan,
we don't get to
one
make
of
it
the
back?
things,
Well,
Ryan, one of the things that we've heard is I know they have a list of other options that Dr. Amy Krause presented at September 12th meeting, right? As far as other options, we heard two of them tonight, right?
Okay.
One of them is the levy that went down 80-20, right, by Grailville and build 3 new properties plus 50% of it for the middle school and high school, right? She presented options of keeping the existing properties and try to build inside, which, I would contend if you did some brainstorming, you could do it a little less economically, but that's besides the point. The third option that hasn't been discussed is there a 20 or 25 acre site in the Loveland School District, okay? And then you basically do the same thing you're talking about here, but you don't have to displace people one at a time. So you have $5 million comes out, you build a building, you move them, you tear these down, you build a new building, you move them, and then you sell off whichever property is the least attractive that you want to keep, because you've just bought 25 acres or 30 acres somewhere else, not 55 acres, not 110 acres. I haven't heard that option. I don't know if that property is available, but certainly finding a 20 or 25 acre site in Loveland is easier than a 55 acre site.
My
right? But I haven't heard that option.
was that there was no property. That was my
And John, I don't know if you want to
understanding
chime in, but I know when we were doing the master planning last year, that was the first thing we looked for, was a site for one school building. There was no site even big enough for one school building.
About 35 acres for $790,000.
Where?
Is that in Loveland?
1083 O'Banionville, 5 minutes from downtown Loveland.
Yeah, that's in Little Miami Schools.
Little Miami.
And we can't
That's what I'm
annex
paying
it.
taxes on right now, in case anybody's
So the
interested in
annexing
that.
is nothing to the school district, that would be the city. So if it's in a separate school district, that school district has to relinquish the land to the school district. So basically, somebody would petition that land to said school district, and that school district would say yes or no. So-
And have we tried
All I can do is say that.
In general, school districts do not cede land to other school districts because it's seen as starting a slope of ceding their property in their district. So we have had discussions with Little Miami in the past, and there have been developments that have been interested in coming from Little Miami to Loveland, and it has not been, it's not been a viable option.
Just to throw out one more, because we did, like I said, we did look when we first started master planning, and we knew that we really probably needed at least one site. We did start to analyze, okay, well then we would have 5 school building sites for Loveland, because you have the primary elementary, LECC, new site, middle school site, and high school site. And we did weigh during our community meetings and during our option meetings, the pros and cons of maintaining and operating 5 individual sites versus the potential economy of scale that we might get by having 3 buildings or 2 buildings. Again, you're right, we never said set in stone it's going to be 3 buildings. We knew we were going to build new 4K through 5 was the master plan on Grailville site. But we talked about the economies of scale of having those 3 buildings on the same campus in terms of transportation, in terms of a central kitchen that can feed all 3 buildings, in terms of shared parking or shared busing and potential shared field space. So there are some advantages to being able to have all 3 of those buildings on one larger site and selling the 2 smaller ones, as opposed to having 3 separate smaller sites that all need all of their infrastructure at their individual sites. So we did weigh those pros and cons. The other thing I do want to recognize is the site amenities that Grailville does have. We did spend a lot of time in our focus group sessions and in our community sessions, talking about the outdoor learning opportunities that Grailville is going to afford Loveland that our smaller sites might not. And I do think that's something to take into account. Those natural resources, those natural amenities that exist on that
So in an
site.
ideal world, today we have 5 buildings across 3 sites. If you were to start from scratch, what would the perfect scenario look like in terms of number of buildings and number of sites? Is it 5 to 2?
I would still, be given the size of your buildings, I would still suggest 5 buildings, because it's really hard to manage a 1,500 or 1,800 student elementary school. That becomes, from a social emotional standpoint, from those kids being able to learn in a building of that size and the administration being able to keep their arms around all those kids, there is a point where, you know, the data says, you know, the optimum size of a high school, you can go bigger on a high school and then a middle school, and that there is kind of a point where your elementaries are gonna feel too big.
Is that?
So yeah, I would have said, if I started from scratch and said build new, yeah, I would probably suggest 5. I would suggest 5 buildings. And the other part of this conversation has to do with the fact that you guys are a grade-banded school district. Okay, and so that has repercussions as well. So you guys, all of your first graders are under one roof. All of you, and that's important. My understanding, that's important to Loveland and important to the culture. And that becomes really important when you look at the future growth and the future expansion on your campuses. When you have 3 elementaries that are all K through 5 elementaries, you can handle enrollment growth differently, because one building might be able to, you can throw a few kids here, throw a few kids there. But when you have enrollment growth and you're committed to all of your first graders being under one roof, all of your second graders being under one roof, that growth becomes really important, because you can't just add on at one building that has the land available, because that add-on has to happen at every single building, because that enrollment growth is going to see itself through every single building. So that becomes an important piece when we were running through the analysis, when we were doing our master planning, which is one of the advantages of Grailville, is that you do have the land to be able to grow all 3 of those buildings, however big they need to be.
So we keep talking about this growth though, but Dr. Krause, your projected growth of the next 10 years is 10%, which is about 40 students a year. Is that included in the building size that you're, you know, designing?
The building sizes that I'm showing
are
for the, no, they went out. They went out, and I can't remember the target year.
So if our projection is 10%, shouldn't that be what the buildings are designed for? At least? They are.
Yes, but the problem is so
You
you
didn't
don't
say they
design
are.
for
Didn't say
50-year
they are.
enrollment growth. You design for 5 or
10%.
10-year enrollment growth. And so as soon as we're 5 or 10 years out, chances
Right.
are you're going to need to add on to the buildings.
That's what the projection is 10
Yes.
years. But after 10 years, we're not gonna, I mean, we keep saying Loveland's landlocked, and then we keep saying they're gonna build all these new homes. Well, which is it? I mean, if in 10 years it's 10%, which is about 40 kids a year, there's not gonna be room for all these new homes. So after 10 years, there's not gonna be all this growth and enrollment. I mean, it's like the sky is falling. You can't say we're landlocked, we've got no place to buy land, but all these homes are gonna be built, and we're gonna have this massive growth. We haven't had growth in 10 years. The next 10 years is projected at 10%, which is about 40 kids a year. We don't need massive school buildings. So the ones you've designed on the land we already have cost us $5,000. We know Grailville will cost us $15,000, not $7,000, because it's over 30 years at $530,000 a year. So that to me is a massive swing of this grand unknown of Grailville, which is 60 acres at $70,000 an acre that we don't need, that we might sell someday to God knows who, for who knows how much money. This huge unknown. What we do know is $5 million gets us brand new buildings for K through 5.
4.
I mean, $5 million for the land, not
K through
I know
4.
that.
K through 4, not 5.
K through 4, fine. Same, my argument remains the same, K through 4. I mean, there's no massive enrollment growth, folks. There's not. There hasn't been with all this development, even if the last 2 properties that people named, even if they develop. Okay, so we get 10% growth. That's 40 kids a year. You put 1 kid in each class. Where's this where's the scare tactic of growth
I'm
coming
trying to figure out the 10%, 40 kids.
That's
That means
Dr.
there's
Krause's,
what, for
10% over 10 years.
That would
10%,
that would not take
400
into
kids.
account the selling of any of the farms, though. If any of the, if Grailville was developed, or if Hoffman happened to be developed, or anything, I think there's a few of them. If any of those ended up being developed, that enrollment doesn't assume that those farms are being developed.
When is the March levy, when is that vote? What date?
17th.
17th, but the contract
March
goes
1st.
March 1st.
March
So if you get the contract and you buy it, and then, or if you don't, and it goes
Well, I
away.
think that's the risk, right? If the board goes through with that, then people vote no for the operating costs because they feel like they haven't been listened to.
Right. Bingo.
Part of the discussion
That's
is
what
the
I'll be
board
pushing.
really needs to make
That's
the
actually-
decision on March 1st.
So here's
And
me.
negative.
This is again, just life according to me. Nobody else.
I like it.
So $5 million, never getting back. So let's just call the $5 million on the cost of, let's call that part of wash. Because we're going $5 million either direction. It's not worth $2 million in a giant budget with all these different things that are going on. To me, again, like according to me, to put kids in trailers for 4 years.
Right.
Our youngest
Where are you
kids.
getting 2 million from?
Because
Grailville will cost
$5 million.
15 million.
7 and 5. 0.7, right?
Grailville will cost $15 million. We are financing it over 30 years. It's not a cash sale of $7 million. We don't know how we're going to finance this yet because we haven't voted on that levy. It might be 10 years.
We might get $3 million back from our properties on.
We might, but why are we going to, I'm not going to give my tax dollars to a whole bunch of maybes.
I'm just saying, you can't use maybe over here and not use maybe over here.
Where's my maybe? My maybe's $5 million, you got new schools.
You're saying maybe we don't sell that for $3 million on Loveland here. Like, there's a lot of people.
What's
that
on
believe-
Loveland here? We don't sell that for $3 million because we're building schools on it. I'm not understanding your $3 million, I'm sorry.
I'm saying maybe we sell that for $3 million, we buy Grailville. So
Okay.
maybe sell.
And I don't like the maybe, I'm saying build
Well,
schools
I don't
there.
like, I don't like the maybe we finance that $5 million.
I think we have a lot of good feedback and a lot of questions, guys, Juliet, and we still have a lot of stuff to get through tonight, like potential budget cuts. So, like I said, lots of great feedback, a lot of questions that we need to think about and discuss further.
Can I ask one last question on Grailville real quick? Is City Council and Loveland City School Districts are collaborating to find a location for a civic center. Was that part of the plan for Grailville?
A civic
Why
center?
wouldn't you all be collaborating with the city council?
Did you say why would?
Okay, it's in their work
Not a
plan
thing.
for Loveland 36-month work plan, and it says, collaborating with Loveland City School District. We will partner with Loveland City School District on issues related to traffic, mobility, planning development, and finding a location for a civic center, development.
That's Loveland City saying that?
Yeah.
Hasn't happened yet.
We tried that once.
They've not, they put it in their
That didn't work so
They
well.
put it in their
It's not a
three-year work
thing.
plan, but they haven't talked to you about it?
No.
Correct.
Talk to them.
Correct.
No, they have not.
Somebody else's circus.
I'd be upset about that if I were you.
There are quite a few things that upset us.
All right, part 2, budget reductions.
All right,
So, taking charge here.
We do have to move on to the
Yeah.
reductions, and I agree. I appreciate the discussion. It is very interesting for me to watch, to be honest with you, but again, a lot of good information. Hopefully you guys have a little bit of a basis to give us some input. Again, it's kind of being crammed down your throats, but we got to make some decisions in the short term. So
One question is there an opportunity to extend the option to buy Grailville to make it through the next levy season?
according to Grailville, no.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Right? She's pretty adamant about that.
Now we're cooking with gas. Yeah, we are.